Shalom and welcome to Genesis chapter 18. There are 33 verses. Beginning in verse 1, we read oak of Mamre versus plain. Again, it's there. And it says here that heat of the day in the MT. Here in the Septuagint, it says noon. So it's more specific as to what time it is. Noon, lunchtime. Verse 3, pass not by your servant, is what Abraham is asking. Here it says, pass not away, I pray you, from your servant. Now, I point this out because it can be misunderstood, because in our modern vernacular, pass away, people use that to mean die, don't die. But clearly it's saying in the Septuagint, pass not by. So don't pass me by. Stay here for a while. So it's important I make this clear. I know it may seem like nitpicking, but just for the record, because language changes so often, we have words like, sick, retarded, things that are actually mean, sick and retarded, ill and mentally challenged, becoming in the modern vernacular something to be glorified and something to be praised, which is not the case at all. So that's why I have to make this clear, because language keeps changing, and I'm going to say devolving in our case, not really evolving. It's just getting more debased and more primitive. In verse 4, it says, let them wash your feet. Abraham is saying, let them wash your feet. Who's them? Well, we would have to reason that Abraham won't be doing it himself. It's going to be his servants, because he has many people living under his household serving him. People being born to him like servants being born under his household, such as Eliezer is one of those. So let them wash your feet, implying that he has servants to serve him and them as well. Versus in the MT, it says, wash your feet. So wash your own feet. Totally different story. And we know in the New Testament, Yeshua's feet was washed by other people. He didn't wash his own feet. Not that it's wrong to wash your own feet, but that's not how you show hospitality. Also in verse 4, it says, refresh yourselves under the tree. Here it says in the MT, rest yourselves. So just reflecting on that verse, meditating on it, when you think of Shabbat, we often think of stop and rest. Whereas looking at this verse, we can also include possibly refresh. We refresh ourselves during the Shabbat, not just stop and rest. We refresh ourselves. We're rejuvenated. We're whatever energy we had left, we're now increased in energy. We have been refilled by our Creator. Verse 5, the whole verse is different. It says here, I will bring bread and you shall eat. And after this, you shall depart on your journey. The MT says, I will fetch a morsel of bread and comfort you your hearts. After that, you shall pass on. It doesn't say that. It says you shall eat instead of comfort you your hearts. And then it says in the second half, on account of which refreshment you have turned aside to your servant. So he's saying you came here because you need to be refreshed. And he said, so do as you have said. I'm not sure who's speaking. I think it's the Lord saying that. And here in the MT it says, for therefore are you come to your servant. So very similar. And they said, so do as you have said. So in the MT it's saying they all said, whereas in the Septuagint it's saying, well, it's the head of those three people who's saying that. The three men, the head of the three men, is speaking on behalf of those three men, not all at the same time. They're not all speaking at the same time. Verse 6 says, flour, fine flour. In the MT it says fine meal. So a little different there, not a big difference, but just a difference in terminology. Verse 7, his servant gave it to his servant. Here it says to a young man. that means it could be anybody, just a random young man. No, it's his servant. It's someone who lives with Abraham, someone he trusts. He wouldn't just give it to any young man. Verse 8, butter and milk. Butter and milk is included in both versions. And this is something notable, something kind of shocking, because as we know in modern Judaism, eating meat with dairy is prohibited. It's not allowed, especially among those of Orthodox Judaism. They would not put those two together and eat them. But here it says butter and milk in both versions. How can you escape that? Abraham served this to not just anyone, but the Lord and his two servants, to people accompanying him, and we know they're angels. Verse 10, according to this period, it says here, according to this period, seasonably, but we read here, according to the time of life. That's what the MT is saying, but it's saying this period seasonably. Verse 12, the thing has not yet happened to me. This is Sarah speaking in her mind, in her heart. The thing has not yet happened to me. Verses, I am waxed old. Shall I have pleasure? We're going to see what this thing is in a little bit. So in verse 13, it clarifies what that is. Sarah says, shall I then indeed bear? I was initially speculating in my mind that maybe she's talking about the custom of women has ceased with her, speaking about menstruation, but no, the Torah speaks for itself. It says that she will I indeed bear. So that's what she was talking about. The thing has not yet happened to me. What thing? Bearing a child. In verse 13, it says the same thing. Shall I of a surety bear a child? But it contradicts itself because it says, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure? And you can take that in different ways, but it's just a little muddy, that wording. Whereas it says here, the thing, and we have to wonder, what is the thing versus the pleasure? And pleasure can be many things. And in this case, we're thinking, oh, maybe sexual pleasure, but no, that's not what it is. It's the thing is childbearing. Childbearing is what she's talking about, what she's referring to when Sarah was speaking in her mind and her heart, not out loud, but inside of herself. Verse 14. This is interesting because I'd say this is one of those memory verses. Let's read the MT first because it is a memory verse to a lot of people. Is anything too hard for Jehovah? At the time appointed, I will return unto you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Versus what it actually says in the Septuagint, the version Jesus Christ, Yehoshua, had when he was alive on this planet and his disciples, it reads, shall anything be impossible with Jehovah? In the scripture it says, all things are possible with Elohim, but with men it is not possible. I believe it's in the New Testament. But that's interesting to note. And also it says seasonably. Once again, it reiterates seasonably versus time of life, the time of life. Verse 17 says, what things I intend to do. The Lord speaking here, Jehovah speaking, versus that thing which I do. So not only is it plural, but that I intend to do. So it's things that he plans to do. He hasn't done it yet, speaking about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But when we read this in the MT, that thing could be a million things. Could be so many different things. But we know it's referring in the Septuagint of what he intends to do, momentarily. Verse 20, we read here, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has been increased towards me, and their sins are very great. Whereas it says in the MT, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very, very grievous. So it's not too different. But the reason I focus on this verse is because what this is referring to, the cry, is the cry of citizens in there. Some could speculate, is it people who live there being persecuted? No, it's not that. I believe it's more specifically those people who are passing through, journeyers, sojourners, passing through, the stranger, the poor, and their cries were specifically being heard by Elohim, and that's according to the accounts written in Jasher, where you have people who are just visiting, passing through, poor people passing through, and they're being killed. They're being put to death. That's a cry that is happening not from the citizens, but according to the book of Jasher, by visitors and poor people who find themselves, they end up there for whatever, their circumstances end up that they wind up there because they're, for whatever reason, that's the way things worked out for them. So that's what I believe the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is. It's not the cry of the Sodomites and the people of Gomorrah. No, it's people who go in there and are persecuted, the stranger, the poor, probably the widow too, and even the daughter of Lot as well. Verse 23, actually, I have to mention as well the young lady who was killed by the bees. That was the last event that the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah had committed, that Jehovah really took notice. He listened to their cry. That was the last straw for him, where he said, okay, that's enough. This lady was covered in honey and was stung by bees, and her body swelled up, she died. Verse 23, we read here Abraham talking with Elohim, with Jehovah. He's asking, shall the righteous be as the wicked? That's his last question. He asked him two questions. Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? And shall the righteous be as the wicked? The MT doesn't even say that. It's omitted. It's not in the text at all. Verse 26, the whole city, it says here. Jehovah says, I will spare the whole city and the whole place. Whereas in the MT it just says, I will spare all the place. Whereas it's a little more specific. I'll spare, yes, the place, Sodom, but also the whole city. So not just an area, but specifically that city as well. Seems to be a little more focused in that verse, in that translation. Verse 27, I have begun to speak. So Abraham is saying, I have begun to speak to my Adon, my Adonai, and I am earth and ashes. But in the MT it says, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto Jehovah, which am dust and ashes. So a little bit of a different wording here. Again, it says earth instead of dust. That could be its own teaching, to be honest, because earth is malleable. It's like clay. Clay comes from earth, actually. Verse 30, will there be anything against me? Will there be anything, in brackets, it's not really there. So will there be anything, Jehovah, if I shall speak? But I guess they're trying to understand what they mean by anything. And again, anything against me is what he's probably saying based on the translator's perspective. Verses, oh, let not Jehovah be angry. Let not Jehovah be angry. And I will speak. So you can see the relationship is more respectful here and reverential. Will there be anything against me if I shall speak? But it's a little more, respectful, reverential. Whereas you're speaking to Jehovah as if he's a reasonable person and a righteous judge. But here he's being spoken to as if he's a tyrant and he's quick to anger. Oh, please don't be angry with me. Come on. Really? No, it says, will there be anything against me if I shall speak? I don't mean to cause offense or please let me speak one more time, basically saying, I beg of you. And he's just using the most respect. He's using a very respectful approach to how he's addressing his Lord. Verse 31, since I'm able to speak, again used there, but in the empty, reiterating, behold, now I've taken upon me. Could be Hebrewism in both cases. And then verse 32, repeating the same thought, will there be anything, Lord? Will there be anything against me, Adon? Where it says here, oh, let not Jehovah be angry. So again, I find that an interesting approach. No wonder people, mainstream Christians and even mainstream Jews would perceive the creator of the world as an angry God, a tyrant, a different God than the one from the New Testament, one that's just not so. And this kind of portrayal, this kind of wording only spins that towards the negative of him being a tyrant, where no, he is very much a father. And if you're a child that really respects your father figure, you would not speak to them in a way that is so carefree. You would say, oh, please, sir, or whatever term of endearment, you know, um, you're buttering them up, but I'm not saying that he's buttering him up. He really is using respect. Abraham is taking an approach that, he can't force Jehovah to do anything, but he's just trying to, plead for mercy, because he knows that the God he serves is merciful, and you can't just expect that he'll be merciful by default, but you also need to believe, yeah, he'll be merciful, but you also need to take the proper steps to show that respect in order to receive mercy. You can't just be arrogant and puffed up and think, yeah, you'll get mercy automatically, but you almost have to, he's really humbling himself. You can see there's an attitude of meekness, and, Jehovah has all power. He really understands who he's approaching, who he's speaking to. So I think that's what we all have to do as well. When we come before, our Creator in prayer, not making light of it like he's just some other person, but he is, in fact, all-powerful, all-knowing, and he gives us everything. He knows everything. He knows the future. He declares the beginning from the end. He's slow to anger. He's good. He's infinite. He can do anything with impunity, but he still chooses to be righteous and holy. And, although this world is in a lot of ways is very much broken and corrupted, he knows this, and this is why he, these things are happening, so that we can really appreciate when those things change, so that we can also use these circumstances to be more perfected, to be to understand, you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. And so in a way, when we're living in these present circumstances where there is a lack of spiritual knowledge, there's a lack of spiritual hunger, you can see just by views of the most perverted things. People will look up things like incest between a mother and a son, and I just put up a picture like that and use a title, and it gets the most views out of all the videos, versus something that's pure and something that's clean and something that'll help people become more like God and improve their lives, and that only get less than 10 views, because it's just not there. It's not in people's inclination to want those things, to want God, to have the love for God. There is no love for God in this world. You come down to it, it's very, I'm not saying nobody at all, but when you look at the billions of people, over 7 billion people, there isn't a billion who actually love God. There's not even 700 million that actually love God. God knows the number, but it's very small. So in comparison to the rest of the world, it is almost like nothing. So, we have to be careful with how we spend our time, with how the things we place our trust in. And, there's a wake up call, a situation that it's so easy to give up. It's so easy to get depressed. It's so easy to just be fatalistic and just turn to hedonism. But, you know, I think God is showing us that He is in control, although things seem bleak, but ultimately He's the one who is orchestrating all these events, whether, no matter how bad they get, they're only going to get worse, but it's going to become a complete turnaround when He finally, tells His Son, it's time. It's time for you to come back to earth. And, we need to be vigilant. We can't let our guard down, because when that day comes, it'll be too late. So we have to. There's a very good quote from Jocko Willink, a former Navy SEAL. I don't know if I'm even recording right now. Okay, I'm recording. It says my screen sharing is paused. I don't know why that is. Okay. But my background says, getting better isn't a hack or a trick or one-time change that you need to make. Repentance too is like this. Getting better or repentance is a campaign. It's a daily, weekly, and hourly fight against weakness, temptation, and laziness, against sin. It's a campaign of discipline. It's a campaign of holiness, a campaign of hard work and dedication, dedicated to Jehovah and His Torah. Waking up early, he says going to bed late. I disagree. Going to bed early is what you want to do. It takes more discipline to go to bed early than go to bed late. And grinding out every second in between. You're putting your full heart, your full effort into what you're doing. Okay, that's all I have to say about this chapter. As you can see, there's a lot to reflect on in this chapter. Just looking at Abraham's attitude when he was speaking to Jehovah, you can see the dynamic that he is very much like a child. Not a scared child that is speaking to their abusive parent, but a parent that, they trust, but you need to show respect and reverence. And again, the fear of Jehovah isn't earthly fear where you're terrified or, afraid for your life. It's a combination of many things, but to sum it up in a few words, it's the love of Jehovah, it's the love of Torah, it's to hate wickedness, it's to love to obey Him, it is to respect Him, to revere Him, it is to understand, yeah, He can vaporize us, but we're not focusing on the fear aspect, we're focusing on the love. I believe in the fear of Jehovah, there's more love than fear, than death. When I say fear, I mean the fear of death. It is more centered on Him, centered on holiness, centered on love, centered on glory, centered on what He can do for us, what He does for us. Like a lot of the Psalms harken back to the things He's done for us. So anyway, this isn't a teaching on that, but I would be amiss to not mention it because I can feel it. And just simply reading Abraham's speech to Jehovah, his words to him, will there be anything against me, Adonai, if I speak yet once? He's not saying, are you going to strike me down? He's saying, please listen to me. I'm just earth and ashes, but if you would please listen to me, and you don't have to, but please be merciful. And I know you are merciful, but you are the greatest. You're infinite. And for me to just speak before you is such an honor and a privilege. And for you to listen, you're not obligated to listen. But if you do, if you would take the time to listen to me, please listen to me. And I beg you for these reasons specifically. So I think that's the attitude I feel in that. And just thank you for watching. Jehovah bless you all. And I pray that it gives you a heart to love Him with all your mind, strength, and soul, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. May He make your way prosperous. I listened to this other channel, AMTV, and they close their video saying, I love you very much. And I find that it can sound insincere, but you have to make sure, I don't see all my viewers, but, Jehovah led you to listen to what I'm saying for whatever reason. He knows the reasons. And Jehovah loves you, and I don't see you right now, but you're you're hearing me, and I do tell you that, I love you very much as well. Maybe not as much as Jehovah, but as much as a human being can, inspired by the Holy Spirit. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this today. I know this is longer than normal message or presentation, I should say. But until next time, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 19. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.